No, I started a little late. Let's see. My computer's being a little funky, so give me a second. I don't know if this is working. My computer setup has been super interesting lately. Should be playing some music. Hoping. Give me 1 second. Streaming. Let me see here. Got home a little late, so just trying to get set up here. Let's see if I have anybody here, anybody watching. Why though? Oh, thanks, man. Looks like Zach's here. I don't know who else is here. I don't know how many people are actually here right now. Let's see. Might just be me and you, man. Let's see. Let's see my channel right now. Anyways, I'm just gonna give it a little bit of time. Looks like there's 2 people. Just gonna give it some time here. See if anybody shows up, and then we'll get started. Yeah. I'm gonna clean up some stuff here. It looks like there's just a lot kind of happening. In fact, I'm gonna go ahead and close that. Looks like there's 2 people on there, so it might just be you and me, Zach, and some other person. So we'll have a lot of fun regardless. So let's see here. Don't know if anybody's here. Looks like we got 3 viewers. If you're here, just say something in the chat. Cool. Awesome. So hope we're all doing well. Let me see what I got here. Awesome. Cool. So really excited to be hanging out with you. Can any of you hear the music? If you can hear the music, just let me know in the chat, because I'd love to know kind of if you can hear anything. If you can hear me, just give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. Cool. So if you are new to programming or just new to this in general, what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to go to my GitHub. It is right here. Let me go ahead and move this over. I'm going to go ahead and close my Slack channel. So right in here, it's going to be github.com/JoshuaJune. Here, it's essentially just going to be a bunch of repositories. If you don't have a GitHub account, you should probably make one, especially if you're going to be like getting into this. I've got a bunch of stuff in here, but the thing you're going to need is this JS array practice. There's a bunch of stuff that you're going to need to not really a bunch of stuff to read over, but there's going to be some stuff that you want to look at. I typically will go in here and hit git clone. So maybe I'll walk us through that. But once you clone it down, you're going to want to run this thing called Npm Install. And what that's going to do is it's going to install all the dependencies needed to run this project. So here I am now. So let me do that. I'm in this project, so I cloned it down already. So you're going to want to have git installed on your machine. But once you've done that, the one thing I do want to show you is this thing. So right here is a thing called a package.json. So as you begin to like kind of get into programming, you're going to start to see this a lot. A lot of the stuff that I am doing is strictly like JavaScript based for the most part. I work at a small startup here in Denver, and essentially what I do is I'm their like front end engineer, which is a lot of fun. I really enjoy it, but you're also going to be hopping in and out of the stack. So like if you're doing a Rails project, you're not going to have this. But when you're on the front end, you'll typically get something like this. This is what npm uses to like install all the dependencies needed for our project. So here I have some scripts that I've made for us, some like scripts that we're going to be using to like run our tests and all that good stuff. If you look here, we have some dev dependencies, which is super important. JavaScript is a little different than other languages. So like if you're using like a thing like Ruby, it's going to compile directly on your machine. The thing about JavaScript is that it compiles in the browser, and as we iterate and get different versions of JavaScript, you'll need to compile it differently. And so we're going to be using some Babel stuff. So Babel, what it does is it takes like the newer versions of JavaScript, so like we call it ECMAScripts or versions of that, and it compiles it down so that it's easier to digest and use. And so here we have Babel CLI, all this stuff. You don't really need to know any of this stuff. I'm not really expecting you to know that stuff. We're using a thing called chai on line 27. What chai is going to do is it's going to run our assertions. The way I like to code is I like to run our things against tests. I declare what I would like to happen and then run my implementation against the expectation. So that's what we're going to be doing today. So there are a lot of different things that we could be using, different tests to be running, but today we're going to go over filter, and if we have enough time, go through reduce. I've already done a video on map, so if you're here to look through the map stuff, I've already done this on my YouTube channel. I'll probably link it at the bottom, but that's what I'm going to be doing later. But for now, I would love to start with filter. So I'm going to go through here and quit that. Cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and kind of look at the tests, and then we're going to run them. So on the left side here, I'm going to be doing my implementation of like the solutions, and then we'll be looking here to run our tests. So why don't we go ahead and unskip it. So we'll unskip the first one. One thing I like to do is I like to say, this is what I expect to happen. This is what I expect to see. And then hopefully the errors will kind of guide me through to get the answer. Does it make sense? Cool. Feel free again, once again, to check, to write something in chat. I'm just going to be watching chat as I'm doing this. I have a separate monitor, so if you have anything you want to say in chat, feel free to say it. And ask any questions so that I can kind of stop and kind of keep going from there. So I'm going to go ahead and run this. I'm expecting, the first error I expect to see is that here on line 9, our test is expecting a variable called results, and it's saying that the results should be this. It looks like we want to return a new array with only even numbers. Okay. So if I run this test, I'm expecting that the error is going to say that results is undefined, or expected undefined to equal this array. That's what I'm expecting the error to say. So I'm going to say npm test, and I'm going to say filter. And looks like I didn't save it, so let me save it first. Let's run that one more time. Oops. And sure enough, it says reference error result is not defined. And so the idea here is I want to do the very minimum that I possibly can to like move the error along. I think oftentimes people are afraid of errors, but the beautiful part about errors is that it actually is going to guide us through the problem to like see the answer. So probably the easiest thing for me to do is to just declare that variable. So I'm going to say here const results. So declared it right here on line 6. I'm going to run the test again, and I'm expecting the test to say I expected undefined to deep equal this array, and that's not working. Boom. Got some problems here. It looks like we got a pretty gnarly error. I'm just going to go with that's what it says, but let's actually see if we can read it. Looks like there's a lot of stuff in there. I'm using tmux, and it's not letting me scroll up. But I'm just going to go with that's what that says. So what I would like to do here is actually filter through. So it looks like Zach said something. If const numbers slash, yeah. So we're going to get into kind of the logic of like what needs to happen here. But essentially what needs to happen is we need to loop through or go through the numbers array and just kind of sift through like, hey, which one of you is even, right? And if you're even, I want you. If you're not even, get out. So if you are new to like any sort of programming, everything you do on a daily basis is going to be like dealing with collections. So it's going to be like, hey, where can I save this collection? And then B, how can I get to that? How can I move through that collection of variables, objects, data efficiently, and then get out of it what I absolutely need? And so with this in particular, we have an array, and an array is a small data set. And essentially what that data set is going to allow us to do is it's going to hold onto like a collection of information. So here in this example on line 5, it's a collection of numbers. So what we want to do is go through each index in the array. We call this an index. So here's index 0, index 1, index 2, etc. And talk to that number and be like, hey, based off of what you are you an even number? Can I rely on you to be even? And if you are, then I want to keep you. If you're not, I want you to leave. That's essentially what we want to do. So we're dealing with filter. So the array prototype thing that we want to use is this thing called filter. So here, I'm going to assign results to the output of filter. So I'm going to say filter, right? And so filter, what am I filtering? I'm filtering the numbers array. So if we look on line 5 right here, this array of numbers is the thing that I want to filter through, right? So here, I'm going to say numbers.filter. Okay, so filter is a method that you use against any array. So what it's going to allow us to do is it's going to allow us to talk to this array here on line 5 and just kind of manipulate our way through it. Now, if this is your first time doing this, I kind of want to show you what I'm talking about. I'm just going to go ahead and take each element in the array as I'm going through it. I'm just going to go ahead and console log that so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. So here I'm going to say maybe this is a number, right? And I want to take that number, every single number, and I want to console log that number every time, okay? Now, the first thing I should see is 1, next thing I should see is 2, next thing I should see is 3, 4, 5, and so on and so forth. So when I run this test now, I expect to see that. And so as you can see here, you can see the console logs right here, right? You can see that 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So what it's doing is it's essentially going through each one of the numbers in our collection one at a time. So that's like the first step that we want to do is I want to take the first number and be like, are you even? Cool. If you're even, I want you to stay. If you're not even, I want you to leave. Now the one thing that's really interesting about filter is you might be tempted to do something like this, like, well, if like number is even, if that's true, like return that number, right? Else do another thing, right? And though that like though that logic is true, like I would say like that's a really good way of thinking this out, filter makes it even easier for us, because all filter really cares about is if the value that you want is truthy. Is the statement, like if I take 1 and I ask it like, are you even, that returns a truthy value, filter will keep it. If another number comes in and it's a falsy value, meaning it evaluates to false, then it'll get rid of it. Okay? So what we really care about is to check, hey, are you even? Now, there's a method that we want to use on numbers called a modulo. So modulo JavaScript. Let's go ahead and do that. Also, the internet, amazing place, is going to help you solve any problem you want to solve. And so what the modulo is going to do for us, whoopsies, is it's essentially going to return 0 if that number is divisible by whatever number you want to give it, right? So if I like I want to check if something is an even number. I'm going to check if it is modulo 2. If modulo 2 returns 0, right? So perfect example here. Actually, let's just go ahead and find it first, and then I'll show you what I mean. Modulo. Okay, that's great. Thanks for nothing. Maybe the percent sign. Cool. Remainder. In Ruby, we call it a modulo. I guess in JavaScript, we call it a remainder. So the remainder operator returns the remainder left over when one operator is divided by a second operator. It always takes a sign of the dividend. So all we really care about, if I take 1 and check that if it's divisible by 2, it's going to return something because like it's not. But if I say 2 is divisible by 2, it should return 0. If I say 4, again 0, right? If I say 100, 0, because it is completely divisible by that number, meaning it is even, right? So I want to check, hey, are you even? So that's what I care about, right? So if we go ahead and get started, I know if I'm taking num here, right? Actually, let me do this. If I have the number here, I want to check if this number is divisible by 0. Now, again, I had said earlier, all filter cares about is if the value you're returning is true, right? So the problem is if I do num modulo 2, let's go and see what happens. I'm going to expect this to fail because the reality is 0 is a falsy value in JavaScript, meaning when you take the core value of 0, it is not true, right? And all filter cares about is if the value you're giving it is true, and it returns based on that. So I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that what's going to be returned to me is in fact going to be the odd numbers, not the even numbers. Because if something is not divisible, what does it return? It returns the remainder, right? So if it's divisible, it returns 0. If there is a value, it returns the remainder value. So 1 plus, right? So anything over 1. And in JavaScript, anything greater than 0 in terms of like numbers is going to be a positive true value. So I'm going to run this. Actually, let's do this. I'm going to run this now. And I expect to see like 1, 3, 5, 7, 9 in there. And it's going to say 1, 3, 5, 7, 9 is not equal to 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Yep. And that's what we got here. So if we look at the error right here, right, 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, I expected 1, 3, 5, 7, 9 to deeply equal 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, right? So that's our problem, right? Our problem is, well, this is the code is reading this as if I'm checking for odd values, right? So one thing I want to show you, and this is like a trick that I've used in the past to kind of help me understand what I'm talking about. I'm a pretty visual person, so I like to see like if something is true. So one way you can tell if something is true is, or like check a Boolean essentially, is to put like what we call it the bang operator in front of it. So if I do this, right, so I put a exclamation point, you should see that return a true or false value. So here, if I say, are you not true, this should return false. You're not true, if I put false here, this should return true, right? It's like, cool, are you not a truthy value? Yes, you are not a truthy value. So here, if I put 1 and I put a bang in front of here, this should say, let me clear this actually so we can see it a little better. If I put 1 here and I put a bang here, what do you think this is going to return? This should return true. Oop, true, false. False should return false, meaning that this is in fact a truthy value. I'm checking if it's not false, right? If I give it a 0, this should return true, right? Because it's saying, oh, cool, like you are actually not a truthy value. So here I give it a positive value. You're false, meaning you are not a false value. You are a true value. If I give you 0, it's going to say, no, you are false. So this is actually true. So if I were, so taking that logic, what I want to say here is, if I wrap this, I want to say, like, I want you to evaluate this statement first. I want to say, hey, I only want the zeros. I only want the things that are evaluating to even. So if I run this, this should pass. Let me save it. Again, feel free to ask questions. I'm literally looking at the chat. The chat is right here. I have another monitor, and I'm like side checking every once in a while to see if you have any questions. So if you have any questions, please go ahead and feed them through the chat. We got 40 minutes left in our stream. A little more. We got a while. So if you've got some questions, please ask them, because I'm waiting to see. So far, nothing. Crickets. We're quiet. I'm going to refresh just in case, because I want to make sure. Then we'll move back in. I'm seeing nothing. Cool. All right. I'm going to just put one more thing in there. Just like, yo, if you have questions, please ask them. All right, cool. Let's move on to the next one. So we kind of already know how to solve this next one, right? We know that if we've done the even, we really just want the odds, right? So anything that is not divisible, which is kind of tricky because you're like, oh, these values are truthy and falsy. But let's do it. So I'm going to say here const. Well, let me run the test first, right? Let's see what the error says. So the error should say that reference error results is undefined. Sure, not defined. So the next thing we need to do is define that variable. That's all we're going to do. And we're going to think about what the next error is going to be. Okay, the next error now should say, I'm going to say that it expects undefined to deeply equal an array with 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. So I'm going to run that and see that fail. Oof, it fails. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and open this up in a separate window, because right now it's kind of being a little annoying. You can't really see the error, so I want you to see the error. So give me 1 second here. So here I'm going to run that one more time, and I want you to see the error, so that we can I can kind of prove to you that I'm not lying, right? Ooh, it's actually mad at the at that, so let's get rid of that. Cool. Blows up. You see all this stuff. Cool. It's really saying unexpected token, right? So it's just like essentially really annoyed at this, because it's just like you're declaring a variable, right? If I even use a var, it's gonna be mad. Yeah, here we go. So some of you might be saying, why did it do that? It did that because when you use a const, you can't leave a const undeclared. Some ES6 stuff. So essentially what we're doing here, what we want to do is say, we need to give you some sort of value, right? We need to give you something to do. So I'm going to go ahead and close this now. How do I do that? That's how I do it. Cool. And what I want to do is say const results equals numbers.filter, because I want to filter through. I want to take each number. Now that I have each number, I only want the numbers that are not divisible by 2. Right? That's what I want. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say this is going to pass. Boom. Passes. Sick. Cool. Cool. So this is fun. For the next one, let's see what we got here. We've got, I want to return a new array of words with only 3 characters in length. That's all I care about, right? So here's the deal. We already know that the error is going to be results as undefined, so let's just go ahead and do it right now. We'll say results, right? Cool. And real fast, I'm going to ask a question in chat. Is the text big enough? Can you see everything. Talking to myself. Cool. So I'm going to take the words. I'm going to filter. Right. And I'm going to say here, I'm going to take a single word. Right. I'm going to do some stuff now. Now you might be saying to yourself, let's see this. You might be saying to yourself, well, it might make sense to be like, well, if the word is greater, if the word is not equal to 3, then get rid of it. Else, then it's like definitely not greater than 3, right? Then just return, or then it is like equal to 3, then return that word. Right? So you might be thinking like, if word is not equal, word.length, right? So I want to get the length of the word. If it's not equal to 3, like don't worry about it, right? Leave it. Else, like return word. Anytime you see yourself doing this, right? A single if and a single else, that's your cue to like know that what you're dealing with is an on-off value. It's only going to be one thing or another. Now, like one thing that I constantly want to reiterate here is that like all filter cares about is like what is true. It doesn't really care about your if else statement. It really cares about like whatever I'm putting on this line, whatever I'm returning needs to evaluate to true, right? So it's really, really interesting about this. I'm going to go ahead and do this. We'll do this, okay? What I'm going to do is I like to see things. I like to like see what I'm dealing with. One thing you're going to know about like what this callback receives, this arrow function here, is it receives a couple of things. Let's just go ahead and do that real quick. So I'm going to take the word. The first argument it receives is word. The next thing, or like the element in your array, so put element in array, right? It's not really descriptive, so that's why I like to use word, right? The next thing it takes is the index, and the next thing after that is going to be like the original array, okay? Now, I have a tool in here called locus, and what locus is going to do for us is it's going to allow us to kind of like poke at the like the bear, right? Like just poke at like what we're dealing with. So here I'm gonna go ahead and put this in here. Okay. Put the locus in there. One thing I've done is I've imported it at the top here. So on line 2, you'll see that I've imported it here on line 2. So I want to go back down to line 22. So let's go there. This is where our logic is, right? So we're moving through this array, and we should be able to see like what we're talking to. So now I'm going to go here, I'm going to clear this, and we're going to run this test and just kind of talk to the code. Okay. So I want us to take a look at this stuff. So here, as you can see, we're in literally line 22. Okay. So if I call the original array, if I type that into my terminal, the thing I should see come back to me is like the array of words. And sure enough, I have my array of words, right? Here they are. Boom. If I want to see the index, I would expect our index to be 0. 0. That would mean our word that we're currently on is pill. Word, excuse me, is pill, right? Now, if I want to grab the length or the amount of characters in the word, I'll say word.length. I get 4. So what does filter care about? Filter only cares about what's true. So if I say word.length, are you equal to 3? That should be false, right? Cool. If I were to take the original array, not that. Original array. Oops. I'm kid you not, the hardest part of programming is literally syntax, spelling. Grab the original array, right? There it is. If I grab, let's say, the 1 index here, which is bad, if I say the length of bad is 3, is that equal to 3? True. right? So I don't really have to put that logic in there because the statement that I'm using to determine whether or not something is like the length. Wow, sorry, my stuff just quit out on me. Oh, never mind. There it is. Is done in this like comparative statement, right? So like all the logic I need is already encapsulated in that statement. So we're just going to use that. So I'm going to quit out of that. Why? Cool. All right. So let's go ahead and do that now. So I'm going to get rid of this. We don't need any if-else statement because all the logic we need is encapsulated in that result. So here, instead of having to explicitly return, we're just going to do this in one line. And what I'm going to say is I only want the words with lengths equal to 3. Everything else, just forget about it. Don't need it. I felt like it was a really good moment to be like, forget about it, like an Italian person, but I'm not Italian, so. All right, let's run it now. Oof. Looks like we ran into a problem. Did I save it? Oh, it's not words, it's word. That's why. Shoot. That's why. Syntax, man. Syntax is real. Boom, it passes. Great. Any questions so far? Alright. Not really seeing anything. Tough crowd. There's only 2 of us, so I guarantee you it's just me and you, Zach. Because I'm not really watching this. It's just literally like coming through my video preview, so I don't know if it counts that as an actual viewer, which would be hilarious if it did, because then it's literally just me and you. Cool. Which means we probably should rethink this. Cool. Don't need that. Let's do the next one. I just want an array of arrays. I only want an array with elements inside of it that are actually arrays. So this is what I want back. This is the dream right here. Right, this is the dream. So how do I do that? I want to do a filter, right? So I'm going to say const results because that's needed, right? So boom, have that. What I want to do now is I want to take the elements and I want to filter through the elements, right? That's what I want to do. I want to filter through those things. So I'm going to take each element in my array. I'm going to call an element. And I want to check if that element is an array. How do you do that? Well, there's a method for that. So typically what I'll do, if I'm trying to figure this out, I'm going to go ahead and Google this. I'm going to show you what I Google, like how to check if something is an array in JavaScript. I already know the answer, but let's just go ahead and check it, right? And sure enough, the first thing that pops up is array.isArray. Oh, cool. That seems really important. The array.isArray method determines whether the passed value is an array. And it really looks like all we want to do is check if the element values inside of our array are equal to those things. So again, filter only cares about what is true. Does my comparative statement evaluate the true? And if it does, then I'm going to return that. So here, I'm going to say array.isArray, and I'm going to say element. You're like, oh, well, I want to see that in action. Well, let's see it in action. So I'm going to go here. So if I say like array.isArray, and I pass through a string of tacos, what should that evaluate to? The correct answer is false. What if I put an object in here and I gave it a key of tacos and I put in a string of true? That should still evaluate to false. Now if I put an array in here, this should evaluate to true. Whether or not it's an empty array filled with stuff, still going to return true because all we care about is if it's true. So filter here should pass the test. Passes. Cool. Perfect. All right. Next thing. All right. This is interesting. This is fun. So we have an object, right? We have a saying. And what I want back is an array of arrays, right? It looks like we're going to human.songs, right? So I go to human.songs, and I'm expecting that this array here is changed with the filtered array. So we need to do a couple of things. I feel like it might be beneficial for us to kind of talk through what we need to do, right? I need to go to the songs array inside of the human. I need to filter through that songs array and only return arrays with the value of song. Return arrays with values that are not cool song 2. I'm going to go ahead and fix this. Let's go back because you can't really see that. So let me do that. So I need to filter through the array, filter through the songs array, and only return arrays, RAs, with values that are not cool song 2. And then once I do that, I need to set that array as the current songs array in the person object. See, all filter does for you is it returns a new copy of that array. So for instance, if I were to go here, right, I clear this, and I say like const places, right, and I'm like San Diego, Denver, Atlanta, and let's keep it at that for now. Right, I got all these places. Right? The beauty of filter is that it returns something new, right? So if I were to go into places, right, which is my array of stuff, and let's say just like pop out one of them. Pop removes, I believe it's the first one out of the array. Or the last one, not the first one. So that removes Atlanta. If I go to places right now, there should only be 2 in there. Because it's removed my source of truth, right? Which is not really what you want to do. What you want to do is kind of keep your source of truth separate from like everything else. If I make changes, I don't want to be like changing the final copy. I want to be making a copy of the thing that I want to change and then change it from there, right? It would be like if any change made to the original version of this iPhone were then all of a sudden like funneled to like every other iPhone, right? Like it would just be a disaster, right? Because you have all these different prototypes, you have different copies of those particular things. And so what we want to do is make changes to a copy instead of manipulating the new thing, right? So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna go back to places, and I'm gonna go ahead and push Atlanta back in there because why not? Never been to Atlanta. Hear it's great. Can somebody confirm that it's a good place? I hear it's great. I'm going to go here and say places. We're back. So what I want to do is I want to return something new. So I can be like place. So if I say like const only San Diego, right? Then it'd be like places.filter a place or a location. And I only want locations that are equal to San Diego. Ooh. Location does not define its location. Ooh, oh, it's already been declared. Why? This is the worst part. Sorry, only San Diego. I'll put only SD. Let's just do that. So now when I call only SD, I should get an array of only San Diego. And when I actually call back to like the original array, which was places, it should still be places, right? So that's why this last portion here inside of our code where I say we need to reset that is because when we filter, we aren't actually getting rid of the thing inside the object, the array inside the object, right? We are just making a new copy of it, okay? So what we really want to do, what really matters to us, is we need to essentially go to the humans array, filter it, change it, and then set it. So we're gonna do this in increments because this is kind of like a big one. I'm gonna do it the way that you probably shouldn't do it first, and then we're gonna do it the kind of the new way where we kind of leave our source of truth separate from like the new thing. So let's go ahead and do it. So the first thing I need to do is get to the human song array. So let's actually do that. So I'm going to say here, actually, sorry, let's do this one more time. I'm going to say human, which is my human, dot songs, and I want to filter through that songs array, right? Cool. That's the first step, right? Now that I'm going through that, I want to take every song in that array and check to see if it's something, right? So probably the first thing we should do as a sanity check, I think this is really important for like beginning developers, is to have some sort of sanity check. Like, is this working the way I'm assuming it's working? I'm going to say console.log song, okay? And what I want to see is every like array printed out. So I'm expecting to see cool song 1, 50, cool song 2, 100, cool song 3, 90, right? And there they are right here. There's cool song 1, cool song 2, cool song 3. If you're like, I want to see it, let's see it, because I feel like that's really important. I'm going to throw my tool in here, my eval locus, to make sure we can kind of talk to our code now. This is going to go through. And so here we are, the yellow box here, right? I'm going to say I want to see what the song is, and it should be an array with cool song 1 in there and a second value of 50. Cool. Exit. The next one, if I say song, should be cool song 2, value 100. Sweet, because it's going through one at a time. And then the last one should be cool song 3, 90. Cool. So that works. We haven't done anything, right? So what I want to do is I want to compare the array. I want to say cool song 2. I want to make sure that the saying is not equal to the song array, but what part of the song array, right? If I do this right now, nothing's really going to happen, right? Because it's comparing a string to an array. Those are completely different things, right? So like if I were to take this, I'm going to go ahead and actually, I'm going to go and copy this right here. In essence, it would be me saying this is cool song 2 equal to this. That's false. They're not the same thing. What I really want to say is this, right? How do you do that? So like, so if I say like const song is equal to this, if I grab song, it's a value. The value of song is that array. So how do I grab the first value in the array? By index. Right? I want to grab it by index. So I'm going to say here's 0. I get cool song 1. So the nice thing about this for us is if we look here, every first value is that string, right? So really what I want to say is, cool, I want the first value in that song array. And it might be more helpful if I say this, song array. One thing that's really, really important that I want you to keep in mind as you're doing this is that what you name your variables absolutely matters, because it really makes your code readable. Code is for humans first and then computers second, right? The moment we get into thinking that it's for computers first, we kind of lose everything, right? The thing is, a computer is not going to fix itself. A human is, right? When I'm coding every day, I'm thinking, well, somebody else is going to read this other than me. And also, I'm going to come back to reading this, and I may not even understand it later, right? So that's why when you are writing code, what you name it absolutely matters. So here, let's see what this returns. I'm going to say const. I'm going to call it tacos for now. I just went on this whole rant about naming conventions. I literally called this tacos. What if I just call this filtered songs? Filtered songs, right? And I went here, and let's just take a look at it. I'm going to go ahead and throw a console log in here. And I just want to log those filtered songs, right? And I'm even going to go further and say here, logged songs. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and run that now. And if we look right here, that looks like what we want, right? Cool song 1, value 50, so on and so forth. So if we actually look here, that's what we want. So we've done this. I've gone to the song array, went to the human, filtered to the song array, and only returned the values in the array that are not cool. So I've done that. We've done that here. Now we need to set that value in the person object, right? That's the next thing we need to do. So what I'm going to do, I think what might be helpful is if we actually kind of poke at it again. So I'm going to throw a locus in here. And we're just going to go ahead and try to poke at the code. In fact, I want to go further down so you can kind of see everything. Let's do that. All right, so if we look at it, if I call human, I have my human, right? I call filtered songs, and I should have my array of filtered songs. Now, if I go to human.songs, that is the old stuff, right? It's the old stuff. What we want is the new stuff. We want to replace the previous value with the new value, right? So I'm going to say human.songs, which is this. I want to reassign that value to the filtered songs, right? That's what we want to do. So what's cool now is if I say human.songs, it is the new value. It is a new filtered version of our array, right? So that's what we want to do. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say, cool, the last thing we want to do is say human.songs is equal to filtered songs. Okay. Cool. And let's see here. Let's clear this and let's run it again and see if this is going to work. Cool. It looks like it works. Now, I'm not super into this for a couple of reasons. We're literally physically going into the human object that we've created here and just changing its value. That's dangerous because your source of truth has now changed, and now let's say we have a variable that depends on this variable being consistent, right? And we change it, all of a sudden everything that references that value is now changed unintentionally, right? Or intentionally. So what we would like to do, what's the better option, is just kind of what filter does, return something new. We should instead kind of change our tests to say that instead of checking the human for the songs, right, that like we check the new version, right? So I think one thing I want to do, we're gonna change our tests here because it's gonna be a little more beneficial for us, I think. So what I want to say is like that the human songs stay the same, right? Why? And what I want to check next is I want to expect that the new human dot songs should equal essentially all of this, right? Oops. Whoops. Vim. Why Vim? Cool. It's not Vim's fault. It's my fault. So what I'm essentially saying is that, like, with all these changes, that the changes don't affect our source of truth, that, like, the human songs stay the same, and that, like, our new human reflects the changes we want, right? So we don't really have to change much code. This is the best part about this whole thing, is that, like, I'm not having to change really much of anything except for this one line of code on line 41. The problem that we're facing here is line 41 is physically going in to the human, changing it, right? What we want to do is instead say something a little more different and say const new human, right? Because we need to declare this variable, right? And I'm going to say new human, right? Is going to equal essentially everything that our old human was. So this is me making a copy of it. So in JavaScript, this is a thing called the spread operator, meaning we're taking the contents of everything else and go ahead and spread that through, right? And I want you to override what the current songs are and change them into this. So what's really neat here is I can say this. I can say filtered songs, or songs, excuse me, is equal to filtered songs. Okay. I'm gonna get rid of line 42. There's my one line solution. Let's see if this works. This is the cool part about tests, is you can refactor your code and see it still works. So it looks like it's still working. One thing I want to change to, this is going to make it even more explicit, is here I can really just call this songs like that. And instead of here like declaring songs, right, and then saying, oh, your value is this, they're now the same key, right, the same value. So what I can do essentially is say, oops, is I can say this instead, and that should still pass. Let me run the test, and this should still pass, and it does. So what have we done? We have filtered through our array. We've made a new copy so that our source of truth remains the same. Nothing's changed, right? And that when we make our changes here on line 40, that the new human receives that change, and it passes, and it works. Cool. So we got a couple more tests to run. Let's get rid of that. So the next thing that we need to do is we should filter the message based off a string from the user. So it looks like we've got an array of objects, right? And then we're filtering through there. I'm actually going to go grab some water real quick. So give me like a second while I go grab some water. Also, before I continue, I'm going to stop coding and kind of wait for any particular questions that you have, because I don't believe that if you're here for this 101 class or stream and you don't have any questions, you are lying. Trixo asked, hey, what is this stuff you are doing? Right now, we are going through a series of JavaScript tests that I wrote, and we're getting them to pass. And the point of this is to like get better at filtering through arrays and objects. So that's what we're doing. This video should be up afterwards. If you actually want to go through it later, feel free to. But that's essentially what we're doing right now. Any questions on the content? Anybody who's been watching have any questions on kind of what filter's doing? Cool, I'm gonna keep waiting. There's 3 of you, but if not, we'll totally keep going. So I'll give it a couple more seconds, and then we'll get going. It does include, so Trixo asked another question, does it include the built-in tests? It does. So I'll drop the link right now in the chat to the GitHub repository that I've made for this. Let me go ahead and grab that for you, bud. Then you can go ahead and clone that. So I'm going to go ahead and drop that into the channel. There are instructions in the README, so if you just kind of check out the README, it should walk you through kind of how to do it. So there it is. Oops, that's not it. This is it. Just copied the. Let me copy the link address. This is what you want, man. Boom. There it is. That is that. Great questions, man. Cool. All right. Cool. Let's just go ahead and chug along. I don't know if we're gonna get to reduce today. So what we're doing now is we are dealing with objects, right? The first thing I like to do with tests, and I would encourage you to do, is always look at like what the expectation is, right? Just kind of like how you're given a task in anything. You're like, what do you want the output to be? You get a job from your boss. Your boss is like, I want this particular thing built from you. You get a client who's like, I want my car painted this particular color, blah, blah, blah. You're like, okay, cool. That's what you want. Let me build everything I have around that expectation, right? So on line 61, we're expecting our results from the filter to look like that, right? We're expecting it to have these three particular users, right? So we're saying, cool, like I want to make sure that you have those values for me. So we are given a user string on line 51, and then we have our messages array, and we want to filter through, and we want to check every message within that user and check, hey, cool, do you contain any semblance of this string? That's what we want to do. Okay, so probably the first thing I need to do, I like to write pseudocode because it helps me think. I want to like humanize a problem. So what I'm going to say here is I'm going to say, cool, let's loop through, or let's filter through the messages array. Each element in that array is an object, so I need to go to the message key of that object. I need to check the string and see if it contains any semblance of the user string. Right? That's what I want. If it does, return it. Okay? That's what we want to do. Sounds like fun. So let's do it. So one piece at a time. So I'm gonna say here, as we kind of established, if we're gonna need results, right? So I'm gonna say const results, right? And that's gonna equal messages.filter. We know that. Filter takes a callback, right? And all a callback is just a fancy word for like another function, right? So I'm gonna pass it a callback. It's gonna take, and let's just call it a user, right? And then we're gonna do some stuff. So we're doing line 60, and let's just go ahead and I'm gonna go ahead and do a locus in here because I want us to see what we're dealing with, right? Because I feel like that's gonna be really helpful. So here we are. If I call user, the first person I should get is Louisa, right? So the way I traverse this object, all an object is really a key value pair. So we start to think of it as like, if I have the key, then I have the value, right? So the key is going to be what you see on the left side of the colon. The value is going to be on the right side of the colon. So if I went to user.user, horrible name, I'm going to fix it, right? We get that. If I say user.message, I get that message, right? So let's just go ahead and let's change that one more time. I don't like user. I'm going to say like, let's just say person, because it's really a person. It's not really a user. Let's run it one more time, okay? Actually, let me clear this so that we can see a little bit more better. So if I go to person, I get that, and I say person.message, I get right? And I say person.user, I get the user. Cool. So what I want to check is if that message, the person.message, contains any semblance of that user string. That's what we want to do, right? So how do we do that? First of all, let's somehow grab the message. All right, I got a question here. Is your locus function in that JS array practice GitHub? I would like to check that out. Yeah, it is. So it's actually going to be, it's not a function, it's a npm package that I've used in the past. It's really helpful when you are trying to debug JavaScript like code that isn't per se like compiling in the browser like immediately. So like if I wrote tests like here, I'm just basically kind of running the code in my terminal. It becomes very, very, very helpful. So, and Trixer, you said message, not user. I'm going to the person or the user object and then grabbing the message piece. So I do have to reference that piece first before just say message. Any questions before I move on? Great questions, by the way. All right, I'm just gonna keep looking back and forth. So, cool. So we got our person. We want our message, right? Now there's a function that I like to use on strings. It's called index of, because what we want to see is if like the thing we're comparing the string to like works with that. So let's just try it in here, right? So like I'm gonna throw the eval locus in here, and then we're gonna look up that one more time. Cool. So we're running it. The first person I have is Louisa. I said person.message. I get right? What I want to see is if this message contains su, right? So if we go and look up index of, what it's going to do is it's going to return it's a method that returns if that element that you're asking like a string on. So like here, if I look at like, let's see, beast index of byte. So here everything's using an array, but I want to use a string per se, because that's kind of like what I really care about. It's going to tell us if that string is inside the array. So like, or in that the value we're looking at the string is contained inside of that string. If it is, it'll return 0. The best case scenario will return like 0, meaning it's the first thing in the string, and any number above that. If it is less, if it's not there, it's going to return a -1, meaning that value is not there, right? So what we want to do then, so like here I have right? So like index of, I believe we called it user string. It's a -1 because it's not there, right? So now that we have that, we know that when we're using the when we're going through each message, if it's there, it's going to return anything 0 and above. Real fast, looking here. Yeah, I probably should do that. But to be honest with you, Stacking said I should probably create a macro to do that. To be honest with you, I don't mind typing. So, but I probably should do that. I'll get on that. But that's some good feedback. I appreciate that. So here, going back to like what I said, that's kind of what we want to base our return statement on, right? So here, what I want to return is going to be person.message, and I want to say the index of that message or user string should be greater than or equal to 0. Okay, that's what I really want. So let's see if that works. Ooh, hold on. Didn't save. looks like we got a failure. It expected an array of 2 things to be in there. And it looks like it's failing. So what are we failing on? It looks like it expected this but got this. I actually want to see that. Console, we'll put a locus in here. This is why I love locus, because I can talk to my code. I think I saved it. Cool. Let's see what results are. Cool, so we're missing I'm loud, which doesn't make sense because that actually shouldn't be there, because SU is not in there. So it looks like my expectation is incorrect, because I'm loud doesn't interface with SU at all. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and get rid of this because that was an error on my part. Cool. So that should pass now. So let me go out here on line 62. Let's get rid of that. Let's run the test. That should pass, and then I want to refactor it just a little bit. Cool. So the one thing I want to change here is I'm going to the person.message, right? And one thing that ES6 gives us inside of JavaScript that's really neat is I can just kind of pull a value out of an object by deconstructing it. So what I can say here is I can say message instead of referencing that object of person every single time. And now I can just say that. And what's really nice about this also is I can do this all in one line, and I can just say, cool, return this to me, right? And I'm going to get back to like what the deconstructing piece is, and then we'll kind of go from there. So let's do that. And let's see what happens. Cool, that still passes. So what is deconstructing? This is a thing you're going to see a lot in like current JavaScript code. So like if you're using like React or something like that, you're going to see this in a lot of like ES6 stuff. So like if I have like const person and I say like location is Denver, right? Instead of saying person, and actually it's, yeah, instead of saying person.denver or person.location every single time, right? And being like const or like var location equals person.location, and then asking what just happened. I think asking for the hold on, location is a reserved term. So let's go ahead and redo this. I'm gonna say, let's refresh it actually. If I say const best tacos, and I say place is San Diego, right? And I go to besttacos.place, I get that. Cool, I can say like place is equal to, instead of const, we'll say var place is equal to besttacos.place. I call place, I get San Diego. That's really cool, but I'm like constantly referencing that object, right? So if we do it again, I say best tacos, what I can do is I can say place, const place is equal to best tacos. And what's nice about that is if I call place now, just get San Diego. So what we're doing here in this particular instance is we're essentially going through each object, and I'm saying that every like object that's in here, I'm just going to grab that message key and then check the index of that and assume that it's greater than or equal to 0. Cool. Cool. Alrighty. This one's fun. This is the last one I'm going to do for today's stream because I've been going for like an hour and 10 minutes. But before I do that, if you have any questions, please go ahead and ask them in the chat. I'd love to answer them for you. Just gonna wait a little bit. It's hard to like talk and constantly code. I used to do that when I was teaching, but you don't realize it if you haven't done it in a while. Cool. I'm not really seeing any questions. All right. Well, so what we want to do now is we only want objects inside of our array that contain any of these IDs, right? So we're going to say const results is equal to data y filter, right? So we want to filter kind of the same thing. We want to make sure that the ID that is in current ID of the data object we are on, right, or the index within the data array, that the ID is included in line 71's IDs array, right? So I want to make sure, like, if I grab the ID, are you inside here? If you're not, I get out. If you're here, you can stay. So every filter, every like array prototype receives a function, a callback function, right? Now instead of me, so if I said person in here, right, or if I said, what if I called it like account? Not account. This is like, yeah, it's a person, right? Because they have person one, person two, they have an account, they have an ID. I could be like person.id, right? Now, to my point previously, it makes more sense to say, oops, why then? Makes more sense to say in here, ID, right? So now I have that ID. And I want to be like, the IDs, does it includes this particular ID I'm looking for? Now, what's really cool about includes is it's going to go ahead and check our array for us and ask us like, hey, does this thing in here, right? So like if we clear this and I say const, kind of like what I said last time, I'm going to say locations. Let's say low, right? And I say San Diego, I say Denver, Atlanta, right? And instead of locations, let's just say places. Okay. So I got places. If I say places dot includes, let's say LA or Los, yeah, let's say LA, right? This array should return false, or this function should return false, right? Because it doesn't exist in there. If I say San Diego, true. If I say Denver, true. Now if I do this, Denver with 2 spaces, it's going to say false because they're not the same values, right? I'm pretty sure I can say trim here and that should be fine. Yep. Cool. So you can actually trim off the extra white space, which is nice. So what we're asking it is like, hey, are you included in here, right? And so that's really what we're doing here. So let's see if that passes. Cool. We've got all green check marks. So that's all I've got for you today. We went for like an hour and 14 minutes. Before I sign off, I just want to like answer some questions. And one last call for questions. You have any questions for me, please drop them in the chat and we can have a little Q&A. If you have any questions for me about any of the stuff we went over today, or what I'm using, how I'm working with this stuff, feel free to ask them now. If I'm not being clear, I'm going to just type that in here. When you say Kiafi TV, when you ask me what are you using, can you clarify? When you say what am I using, are you talking about like my text editor? What are you talking about? How do you use it? Can we define what it is? I don't know what it is. Can you like clarify what you mean by it? How long do I mean, I don't time myself. So the editor that I am using is a thing called Vim. And it's installed in every like computer for the most part. So if you're using like a Linux machine, you have like some instance of something like this. So I'm using a thing called Vim. I'm using also on top of that a thing called Tmux, which is a terminal multiplexer, which allows you to have multiple panes. So like I'm right here right now, right? So I can have like another pane underneath it. So like if I wanted to like go through and start up an app or something else inside of here, I can do that. So the thing you see on the bottom, like that kind of like green bar, like right here, is really just a part of Tmux or Vim. Cool. Last call, and then I'm gonna call it. So. Oh, so this theme that I'm using, I believe. So, Stacking asks what ZSH theme am I using? So yeah. So first of all, I'm not using Bash. So if you're wondering like why does your terminal look like that, I am using a thing called ZSH. And I believe the ZSH theme I'm using is power level 9000. And then I'm using a thing called iTerm, which is like another terminal environment, which essentially like allows me to customize my colors and stuff like that. A big reasoning for a lot of that stuff is because, you know, like in my job, I'm coding every day, and I want my tools to be kind of inviting, to like invite me to work. And so if you just have like a boring terminal, I like don't really want to be looking at that all day. So like having colors helps with syntax, but also just like helps with like, at least for me, like coming and wanting to work. So Kiafi TV asked if I'm doing this like an hour a day every day. I'm not doing it every day. I'm thinking about doing it like once a week. I feel like coding is really awesome, and I'm just trying to see if anybody's actually into this stuff. I know I've got like a group of like maybe like 2 people who come, but like I'd love to like do this every week if people would be down to join. Coffee asked like what I do for work. I'm a front-end engineer at a fintech startup here in Denver. So that's what I do. I write primarily, I'm doing a lot of React stuff. So I'm doing React.js, React Router, and Apollo on the front end. And every once in a while I'll hop and do some backend stuff, Ruby on Rails. I started doing backend stuff initially, but felt more drawn to front-end code. So that's what I've been doing. I found that it was more challenging for me front-end stuff than like backend stuff, just because it was harder to find errors and troubleshoot. So I really like JavaScript. Trio asks, hey, React versus Vue. I'm gonna take React all day for a couple of reasons. I think the community support is massive. So like if you're looking to figure something out, like I think it's all there. I think Vue, first of all, I'll say Vue has really great documentation and the community is super awesome. But I think if you want to scale something, React scales very well. You're going to lose a lot of your convention stuff. And I feel like from what I hear, Vue has a lot more conventions, but I really like React. Facebook uses it. It's got really great testing stuff. So like if you're into Jest and using Jest, it's really great. So cool. It looks like Yafi TV is like really trying to get into some React stuff. Cool, man. I'm doing some basic stuff right now. I'm thinking about maybe porting towards like maybe doing some React stuff. I have been doing a lot of Apollo lately, which has been really awesome. It's like a subset of state management and asynchronous state management from like Redux, which is really cool. End of 2019, you need to pump the numbers way up. Let's make it by the end of 2018. Stacking, I don't really know what that means, but appreciate it. Cool. If you have any more questions, ask them, but I'm about to call this. Cool. Well, cool. That's awesome. So Truaxo just said he finished bachelor's in web development a month ago. Congratulations, man. That's really awesome. Some really hard work in there. I hope you land your first job too. I think that like coding interviews are really great, and I think that the right company shouldn't also just be looking for like programming understanding, like your like intellectual ability to like solve a problem, but they should also be looking at like, are you a good person to pair with, right? Because so much of my job is not just like solving problems, but it's like interfacing with other people around me, right? Like I want to fix this bug, I need you to fix it, I need to be able to interact with them and also interact with my team and kind of explain like the problems I'm trying to solve, articulate them well so that we can come to a good solution. So like I think that technical ability needs to be there. That almost should be assumed if you're like being interviewed, right? And a lot of the important stuff is like, do you have professional skills? So my like I guess my advice to you would be like, make sure that you are like doing the things like, yeah, you're on time for the interview, that you're like personable and stuff like that. Like the fact that you've graduated with a bachelor's, your employer should almost just assume for the most part, like after you've made it past some of the more culture fit stuff, that like that you should be good to go. Oh, cool. I got you stacking. Cool. So it looks like Coffee TV was a data scientist or scientist. That's awesome, man. That's really, really neat, actually. Cool. Well, friends, I am going to call it. But if you are interested in more of this stuff, go ahead and hit me with a follow. I'm probably thinking about doing this again next week, just depending on if people are still interested in stuff like this. But thank you so much for following, if you followed, and sticking around. Have a great evening wherever you are, a great morning if you're watching this somewhere else, and I will hopefully see you next week. Have a good one.